Hello. In 1990, British board game manufacturer Waddingtons released a brand new fantasy board game that was aimed at families and young kids, and which offered fun, simple, engaging, and fantastic gameplay. But more than that, it featured a game board that could magically triple in size at the roll of a dice. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm exploring the history of the Key to the Kingdom. The Key to the Kingdom is a pretty simple board game that demands exploration, plenty of luck, and the will to thwart the evil machinations of the Demon King. Players make their way across the kingdom, braving perils like the Sleeping Giant, the Living Forest, and the infamous Rat Trap, so that they can complete their search to find the magical key. At first, players can explore only 2 realms, but by entering the whirlpool on either section of the transforming game board, they will be transported to even more areas of adventure as the board is unfolded and dangerous new hazards are revealed. This family board game was designed by Paul F. Bennett and released in 1990, and young Jordan Sorcery could not get enough of it. I absolutely loved jumping in that whirlpool and unfolding this enormous magical kingdom. It was genuinely just awesome to do. It's very simple, it requires an awful lot of lucky dice rolls, but for me at that age, it was absolutely the perfect step to getting into the wider fantasy tabletop world. It was really important to making me the gamer I am today. So that is why I wanted to take a look at the history of this game. But before we do that, I just wanted to say that if you like this video, please consider giving it a like, and if you've not subscribed to the channel, please do so if you want to see more board game histories just like this one. John Waddington, a Leeds-based printer, founded Waddingtons Limited with the help of actor and playwright Wilson Barrett at the turn of the century, with the intention of printing materials for use in theatres. But in 1922, they entered the gaming market with the printing of their first deck of playing cards. From there, they would begin publishing boxed family games, and even change the name more than once, before settling on just the simple name Waddingtons, their final form until the 1994 acquisition of the company by Hasbro. Amongst the many games that were first released by Waddingtons were Anthony E. Pratt's Cluedo, which was licensed to US board game manufacturer Parker Brothers, who released it under the name of Clue. In return, Parker Brothers licensed Monopoly to Waddingtons for them to release in the UK market. Through other licensing deals, acquisitions, and takeovers, Waddingtons ultimately released versions of Subbuteo, Risk, Top Trumps, and Sorry. And it was to Waddingtons that artist Paul F. Bennett took his original creation, The Key to the Kingdom, after he'd been inspired to make it when he bought a copy of D&D to play with his family and was disappointed by the contents of the box. In an interview available on my website, Bennett recalls that inspiration. The idea came from buying Dungeons and Dragons from a shop. It was a large box with great graphics on the lid. It looked very exciting. When I opened the box, there was an empty box, except for a small black and white rules book in the corner. You were expected to put in all the hard work, use your imagination, and create the game yourself. And I felt cheated, as it wasn't cheap to buy. I decided I could create my own exciting world for my kids that they would enjoy playing. It was this original prototype, designed and illustrated by hand, that Bennett took to Waddingtons, and which they largely reproduced with new art and components for the final version of the game. D&D was continuing to gain popularity and prominence during this time, and other companies had had a similar idea about creating introductory games that would allow younger players to start their journey with fantasy gaming. In fact, Games Workshop and MB Games had recently released their Hero Quest adventure game, but I don't think it is a very fair comparison for the Key to the Kingdom. Much more apt is, I think, another Games Workshop game, Talisman. Like Talisman, the Key to the Kingdom is largely a roll and move game, where the whims of the dice can play cruel tricks on players, but can also introduce incredible tension and moments of spectacular good fortune. Players move according to their role of a D8, but not before the dangerous Demon King, who also moves randomly around the board every turn. In order to collect the magic key, players must make their way around the intricate and fantastic game board, venturing into key locations like the Banshee Towers or Temple of Martyrs. In each location, you can defeat monsters and claim treasure cards. To win the game, all you need to do is have the key to the kingdom in your possession along with any other treasure card. Sounds easy, right? And ultimately, yes it is. But also, it's not, because there's things to fight and do first. The treasure cards are hidden within card sleeves, meaning that the location of the key is random. Plus, alongside treasures like the Crown of Glory or Ring of Power, there is also a sneaky cobra that you would need to dispose of before you can win if you draw it. It's also possible for rival players to land on your square and steal your hard-earned treasure from you. So, players are racing around the board trying to find these treasures, but what is there to stop them? Well, any fantasy world worth its gnomes is full of hazards, and this is no different. The Demon King can send players to the dungeon if he moves onto their space, but it's the more common varieties of monster that will cause you the most trouble. Weird and wonderful creatures, like the Brundlefly insectoid witch, which could also pass for Baxter Stockman, the unusually smooth Sinatra-esque goblin, the fearsome demonic dwarf, or the genuinely unsettling creepy cockatrice. Most monsters could be defeated by rolling a certain score on the D8, but in many cases they could also be avoided or otherwise mollified by using up some of your equipment. Each adventurer starts the game with their own adventurer's pack, which includes gear like rope and food and fire, sword and shield and much more, which they can use once each to best a beast or help with a hazard. The hazards were scattered across the map and represented natural challenges or other unworldly problems. Things like a broken bridge that could be reassembled, a living forest that must be hacked through, or a sleeping giant that you had to creep over. There was a lot of dice rolling to get past these events, sometimes made easier if you had the right gear, but if you failed, it was really only a minor setback anyway. Either you ended up in the dungeon or you lost some equipment from your pack, and occasionally you could lose your treasure too. Plus, there were some helpful hazards, like the not creepy looking at all Wizard of Plenty. The wizard could restore lost items and actually grant you unclaimed treasures from across the board if you could successfully cross his rainbow bridge. But just look out for turtle shells, yeah? I've found plenty of sources online that have claimed that the art for the game was created by legendary artist Kevin Walker, whose work has appeared in 2000 AD, lots of Magic the Gathering cards and Marvel comics as well. He was working with Games Workshop around this time, having worked on things like Mighty Empires and Space Hulk expansions, amongst many other things. So it's entirely possible that he would have been brought in to work on a fantasy board game. But I've not been able to confirm it, and even the game's creator couldn't tell me for sure. So I don't want to say that he definitely did, but some of the art in this game is absolutely fantastic. So who wouldn't want it on their resume? The original cover art for the game features the player heroes evading the looming horror of the Demon King. Interestingly, the character design for the villain was considered so scary that in the wider European market, it was replaced by the still relatively creepy Wizard of Plenty instead. Meanwhile, in the US, the game received an entirely new cover, which I'm not quite as keen on, to be honest. Plus, the absence of the definite article in the name of the game does make it easier to say, but leaves real ambiguity about who or what is key to the kingdom. The art brings the board to incredible life, but it's not just the art that makes it so special, because of course, the real star of the show is the transforming game board. When players jump into either whirlpool at the centre of the starting realms, the board is unfolded to reveal another two realms underneath each side. This was a truly mind-blowing feature for the young Jordan sorcery, the entire game board reshaping itself in a mere moment. It was proper magic. Other players who happened to be on the same section as you would have the chance to run to the whirlpool as well, or else they would fall into the void, which only meant that they needed to roll a 1 or an 8 before they could move again on their next turn. But it wasn't so much the void that was the fun part. No, it was flipping the board open whilst an unsuspecting player wasn't looking and rocketing their character across the room. The boards could also be closed up again so that you could make your way back to the starting space with the key in hand. And just like before, if a player didn't make it to the whirlpool in time, they were crushed by the magic transformation. Now, there were cards in the game that could prevent this from happening, but it was such a fun back and forth tension for the game that it really made the game special. Designer Paul Bennett reflected on the importance of this idea. The whirlpool was integral right from the beginning. It was part of the excitement and was the game's USP. It gave you access to worlds you couldn't initially see. As was often the way in the early 90s, there was also a really fun animated advert for the game, and I'm going to play it for you right now.
There's a brand new game with a brand new board and many sides where perils are stored. It's a magic world of whirling pools, temples and treasures and glistening jewels. If you haven't got the weapons and tools, how are you going to fight those grisly ghouls? Find the key, you're on your way home, but don't forget the cantankerous gnome. Key to the kingdom. Key to the kingdom from Waddingtons.
And if I was just staring blankly at you for a few seconds, that means I had to cut it out for copyright reasons. In more recent times, there have been efforts to revisit the Key to the Kingdom. A 2022 reboot was released by Restoration Games that was mechanically similar, but featured a complete graphical overhaul and also sought to mitigate some of the randomness that was inherent in the original. Now, I've not played it, so I don't know how effective this was, but the art does look lovely. Though, strangely, Restoration Games have no mention of it still on their website, so that's not a great sign. There was also a sadly unsuccessful Kickstarter campaign that had planned to port the game to mobile in 2014. Perhaps more disappointing than those, though, is the fact that Paul Bennett, the original designer, had created a prototype for a sequel that could also act as an expansion to the original game. The follow-up was to have been Fight for the Kingdom, but unbeknown to me, Waddingtons were already planning and were committed to The Dark Tower as the follow-up to the success of Key to the Kingdom. A great deal of time and effort went into Fight for the Kingdom, and I have to say that its rejection, without even viewing it, was a bitter pill to swallow at the time. But such is life. My children enjoyed playing it, and that was the main thing. The Key to the Kingdom was never really going to compete with Hero Quest or Talisman, or even its original inspiration, Dungeons and Dragons, in terms of complexity and depth. That's not really what it was ever intended for. Now, this was all about helping younger players take those first steps from their more traditional board games, your Cluedos and Mousetraps and Monopolies, and going towards those dungeon diving adventures and to have fun whilst they went on that journey. And that is exactly what Key to the Kingdom delivered. For me, the Key to the Kingdom played that role beautifully. It helped me become more familiar with these realms of fantasy and sorcery, and to begin to understand what I wanted from my game-playing experiences. It was really fantastic and fun stuff. And it was simple enough that there were no major fights at the kitchen table with my family, except for those times when you'd keep jumping in and out of the whirlpool and causing the board to open and close just to annoy people. It was a real jerk move, but boy, was it fun. I hope that you've enjoyed this brief dive into the depths of board game history. I certainly enjoyed getting to relive some classic memories from this wonderful game. Thank you to Paul F. Bennett for being very generous in answering my questions. I've put those answers alongside other interviews with game designers and authors onto my website, which you can view via the link in the description. In the description, you will also find my links to Patreon and Discord and my affiliate links for Element Games. You can use all of those if you want to support the channel and the work that I do here. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery. if I've worked out how to do it, it's going to look like I've been crushed by the board folding down. Otherwise, I'll just look like a weirdo.